Good afternoon to you, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sunway University. I am Wu Wing Tai, the lucky man who is director of the Jeffrey Sachs Center on Sustainable Development. In September 2015, the United Nations General Assembly committed itself to achieving 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. In December 2016, the Jeffrey Sachs Center was established at Sunway University as part of a $10 million gift from Seri, Jeffrey Cheah, to the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Today, we are gathered to witness the launch of the new Master's Program in Sustainable Development Management. This development would not have been possible without the vision and support of Seri Jeffrey Cheah, Chancellor of Sunway University, and founder and chairman of Sunway Group. Before I invite Seri Jeffrey Cheah to speak, let us enjoy the following short video.
I really want to inspire other people to make this earth a better place for all the future generation. My vision was to turn this wasteland into a very well-managed integrated township. You just imagine this place was mined out twice. I put a lot of effort into making sure that I bring back the ecosystem. When I was offered a piece of land in Ipoh to develop into a township, there was beautiful limestone hill, the jungle and the cave and the waters. So I have managed to preserve all that. I am very passionate about healthcare and education. It's very important to teach our future generation to give them equal opportunity to learn. So far we have done 330 million ringgit, and this year we are giving another 70 million worth of scholarship. Almost 20 years now, Sunway Medical Center has been set up. We are able to convince Cambridge University to set up a research center here with us, and Harvard to do a training program for doctors. After all I have done in business, it's nothing wrong to do sustainable development to get profitability. I believe the two can go hand in hand.
It is now my pleasure to invite Seri Jeffrey Cheah to open the proceedings.
Yang Berhormat European, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening and welcome to Sunway University. I would like to thank Minister of Energy, Science, Technology, Environment and Climate Change, YB Yang Berhormat European, for taking the time from your busy schedule to be with us today. I can really understand your busy schedule because you have so many portfolio under you. Ladies and gentlemen, on 25th September 2015, the 193 countries of the United Nations General Assembly adopted the 2030 Development Agenda titled Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals range from addressing climate change to making education more accessible, from ending poverty to enhancing gender equality, and to overcome socio-economic issues such as rising inequality. In short, the 17 SDGs represent a holistic approach to creating a better tomorrow for all our future generations. My views on sustainability were shaped by my childhood years, where I grew up in a small town called Pusing in the state of Perak. I witnessed the impact of poverty on families and how it closed off avenues for advancement, particularly in education for the children. And Pusing back then was largely a tin mining town. You could not fail to notice the ugly scars on the landscape left by abandoned mining pools. Poverty and environmental degradation are thus not abstract concepts for me. The very birth of the Sunway Group in 1974 was grounded in the concept of sustainable development. With the development of Sunway City, where we are gathered here today. Four decades ago, this area was a barren land of disused mining pools. Today, Sunway City is home to a thriving community of more than 200,000 people living, working, studying, playing in a safe, healthy and connected environments in Malaysia's first integrated township. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2016, the Jeffrey Cheah Foundation endowed US $10 million to the United Nations to establish the Jeffrey Sachs Center for Sustainable Development at Sunway University. I want to thank Professor Sachs for allowing us to use his name. Your famous name, sir. Actually, he was quite reluctant to let me use his name. I want to tell you the story. He went and consulted his wife and he said, why don't you call it Cheah Sachs Center? Then I said, the Cheah has enough of sex, so no, we don't need any more. So we just have Jeffrey Sachs, yeah? And thank you. The center has become a hub of solution-based research, education, and policy advisory in advancing the sustainable development agenda in the region. Last year, Professor Sachs and a team of international experts on sustainable development delivered Jeffrey Sachs Center's first executive education program to 43 leaders from Southeast Asian government bodies and key corporations. Today, we are proud to mark another major milestone in the center's journey, the launch of its Master in Sustainable Development Management Program. The program will see its first intake in January 2019. It is our hope that this program will produce a new generation of leaders who are equipped with the knowledge, the science, and the analytical thinking to make real positive changes for our country, our region, and our world. The program will involve students working alongside world-class faculty, including Professor Sachs himself. It will also be supported by the SDG Academy, a massive online open course academy by the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. I am pleased to announce that the Jeffrey Cheah Foundation will offer a bursary or subsidy to those who want to take part of 30,000 ringgit, more than 50% of the 50,000 ringgit fee for the entire 18-month program for the first batch of students. Thank you. So please come and enroll for it. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, allow me to share with you details of an event we held at Sunway City here in the football field yesterday morning, entitled Join Hands and Make a Pledge. More than 8,000 people gave up their Sunday morning to be with us for the event. They included His Royal Highness the Raja Muda of Selangor and many other VVIPs. They came together to pledge their support to realizing the 17 UN SDGs. The event testified to Sunway's acknowledgement that realizing the SDGs is not the sole responsibility of the governments alone. It requires the commitment of all sectors of society, the private sector, the academia, civil society, and of course, every single individual. We are all in this together, aren't we? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tan Seri, for the inspiring address. Next, I invite Minister of Energy, Science, Technology, Environment and Climate Change, Yang Berhormat Yo Biyin, to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you, Prof. Tan Sri Jeffrey Cheah, Mr. Jeffrey Sachs, and my colleagues here. We have a Deputy Youth and Sport Minister, Yang Berhormat Stephen Sim. I've also seen the Youth Minister of State of Perak, Yang Berhormat Howard Lee, and ladies and gentlemen, good evening, everyone. It is very good to see all of you today, and it is very good to see the launch of the Master Course in Sustainable Development. Finally, there is a course, Master Course in Sustainable Development Management. I would like to congratulate Tan Sri and Sunway University for being the leader in this. As a matter of fact, about 7 or 8 years ago, when I went to Cambridge University, one of the courses that I wanted to take is sustainable development, but I actually later on choose the easier one, which is advanced chemical engineering. And that time it was very new in all the developed world, and today I'm glad to see that finally in Malaysia we have that sort of foresight into how do we develop our country into a sustainable future. A lot of times that when we talk about sustainable development, one word that will come up, that will come to our mind is this, is that we have to make certain sacrifice. And a lot of people in the developing world would think that, wow, is that about saving the world? If it is saving the world, then what about economy? I am from a ministry with the longest name in the entire history of Malaysia. And that because I have many portfolio, energy, science, technology, environment, and climate change, the Prime Minister, Tun Mahathir, likes to call me a minister of many functions. And then some people say this is a Kementerian dan lain-lain. If you cannot find any other people responsible for that for that particular field, it is your being. For the Chinese, you know, if you're Hokkien, it's I call it Ministry of Pao Ka Liao lah. Pao San Pao Hai, so more the Pao, yeah. So it means actually I take care of the mountain, take care of the sea. So it's really Pao Ka Liao. But in any case, I think my ministry is very related to Sustainable Development Goal. That is why it is, while Tan Sri actually thanked me for coming, I want to thank you for inviting me to come and witness such a step forward for our country. Once again, I want to congratulate you. And it is a very, very good choice that you do not make the center's name as Cheah Sachs. That is a very good wisdom. So let me tell you two things the government will not do, or my ministry will not do in terms of pushing sustainable development goals in Malaysia. Two things I think we will not do. First, we will never sacrifice economic development in the name of saving the world. Because I believe what Tan Sri just said, that development and environmental protection can go hand in hand. And when you know enough, when we can create opportunity enough, we do not only save the country, save the world, but at the same time, develop a new industry for our country. One thing, I think a lot of people, I think I've shared in Sunway University as well, When I first became an energy minister, many people tell me this: we need to save the world. We need to cut our carbon dioxide emission. In order to cut the carbon dioxide emission, we need to increase the electricity bill. So because by increasing the electricity bill, people use less electricity. And because of that, then you will cut the carbon dioxide emission. But can we do that? As a developing countries, there are a lot of things that we need to think about. Many times we are in an aircon room and in Putrajaya office, making policies that will affect the people at the bottommost of the pyramid. And we forget. While we think about saving the country, they are thinking about putting food on their table. And that one thing I ask of all of you who are environmentalists, because you are environmentalists, you are here, that we will never, never sacrifice the life of the Machit and the Pachit for our goal of a green goal. We must think of a solution that we will be able to provide them a very decent life and yet at the same time build the economy and at the same time save the environment. So that's the first thing we will not do. Second thing we will not do, many of you here may not like me to say this. Second thing we will not do is we will not pay for what we did not do. Let me give you two examples. First, on climate change. Today, we are asked to preserve our forests. Today, we are asked to cut our carbon dioxide emission by adopting a more expensive technologies and everything. We are asked to sacrifice our economic growth just in the name of cutting carbon dioxide emission. As a matter of fact, since industrialization, the Western world has emitted so much carbon dioxide emission to the atmosphere that I think they should pay an equal share of it. So this is the one thing we will not do. The second thing that in terms of inequality we will not do is this. This is the second example. Recently, for those of you who read the news, you will read the news about plastics import, right? You will read about the developed country, the UK, the US, Australia, and Japan have influx of plastics import to Malaysia. And that plastics import is, some of them are high quality plastic waste. Some of them are low quality contaminated mixed plastic waste. So what happened is this. What happened, let me just put it bluntly, is that the Western countries or the developed world have actually set their recycling rate of, let's say, for example, 40-50%. You know what? We achieve 40-50% of a recycling rate. This is how we save the environment. But what they do is actually this. They separate the waste, they get the most expensive recyclable and recycle in their country, and the remaining of it, they send it to the developing countries. I tell you, this is injustice. And Sustainable Development Goal is about justice. And it's not only about equality in the country itself, inequality within the country itself. I think it is more on an inequality between region, between developed world and the developing countries. We must make those who pollute the world to pay, whether it's for their historical or the current polluting activities. And that is what we face as a nation. Although the government has actually freezed the import license of this plastics waste, many of them are already in the country, and that we need to deal with that. And one thing I want is this, is that those who are responsible for the rubbish, for the waste, must pay for them, not the taxpayers of Malaysia. So even as we look into Sustainable Development Goals for Malaysians here, what I just want to summarize again the two things the government will not do. We will not sacrifice economic development in the name just for sustainable development. Second thing is that we will not pay for other people's sin. we will pay and we will ask for justice, even in the international arena. And it is not only because that Malaysia must close doors to this import and that we must speak internationally for this. It's because if we don't speak internationally, what would happen to this plastic waste, for example, is that they will go to Indonesia. They will go to Thailand. Eventually, it ends up in our ocean because marine litter is transboundary. So, but I want to share a little bit on how can we not pay for, how can we grow our economy without, grow our economy and save the environment at the same time. This is the government's plan in the future, in the very, very near future. For some of you who are very interested in the energy market, you will know that recently I've announced that the country wants to move our renewable energy generation, electricity generation mix from 2% to 20% by 2025, depending on the technology available and the maturity of the technology. So, and we want to do this not because that, not only about we want to save the environment, but also that because now Malaysia electricity market is very, very dependent on fossil fuel price, global fossil fuel price. In order to give certainty to the industry as well as the people and the pakcik and the makcik in the kampong-kampong, we must have a more diverse electricity generation mix, and sustainable energy and renewable energy is the answer to it. So renewable energy is not only about cutting carbon dioxide emission, it's about changing life. Not only changing the life for the future generation, but changing the life and give certainty to the businesses in Malaysia. And the second thing, second example that we want to do, how can we do two things together? Another one is energy efficiency. The government actually right now is on the plan on doing our energy efficiency action plan. And as a matter of fact, by mid of next year, we will have our Energy Efficiency Conservation Act first draft being tabled. What is going to happen is this, is that we want to encourage and have the regulatory framework so that people start to use their energy efficiently. By doing that, that means your electricity bill of the industry as well as the commercial and the residential will be cut down. You will eventually see a lower electricity bill because you use less kilowatt hour. It's not because the price per kilowatt hour is lower. So we can actually kill two birds in a stone. Energy efficiency not only saves your money, it saves the environment. And with that, we do not sacrifice again. But more than that, what else we want to do? I think this is something that we need all the brains here and the brains outside and the brains all over the world to help us with this. Is that recently, by mid of October, the ministries, we are going to launch this. We are going to launch moving towards zero single-use plastics by 2030. We are going to launch a roadmap towards zero single-use plastics by 2030. And how are we going to do that? Not by just getting people not to use single-use plastics. Because that, just imagine, how are we going to do things without packaging, right? Think about it. Tonight, if you go for dinner, suddenly you cannot finish your food. Then you want to tapao. For the foreigners, tapao means you take away your food. So when you want to tapao, what happens? It's either you don't tapao and the thing sent to landfill and create a lot of, and most of the Malaysians landfills are unsanitary landfill, create a lot of methane gas, or you want to tapao back. The moment you want to tapao back, you don't have a container because you do not expect that there will be that you need to tapao back. So you ask for a tapao. What happened is that they pack it in a plastics container and put inside a plastics bag. So our life will be very much different, very different if we were only saying that we are going to reduce. Another thing that the government is looking at is this. What is the alternative to plastics? What is the alternative in terms of science and tech that we can stimulate today so that it can replace the plastics, the petroleum-based plastics, to biodegradable plastics? The plastics that can be degradable in different environment and in landfill and in oceans. How do we create that kind of industry? The good news for us is this, is that Malaysia is full of biomass. Because we have a lot of biomass, and one of the research that is, the USM is doing is this, is to use our palm oil to produce resin as a feedstock to produce a plastics bag that is biodegradable. That resin, a PHA resin, that is still now in the pre-commercialization stage, and some of the things that government do is to try to make them commercialize and try to bring in investor from Japan, and that has the know-how to help us to make whatever we have in this country and make them a resin and change it to a bag that is biodegradable. Because waste problem is not only a Malaysian problem. Waste problem is an international problem. It's a global problem. And Malaysia, if we can actually use our advantage naturally and build an economy out of the demand for the future, I think there is a lot of room for us to grow. We are not talking about starch-based. Starch-based, a lot of other countries are doing. But what about PHA-based biodegradable bags? And that because we also have many, many biomass, because our lands are fertile, per square inch of land, we produce a lot more biomass. What do we do with them? The good news is this, is that the alternative to polystyrene, single-use plastic cutleries, and most of them are biomass, sorry, my English. So it's end of, late of the day. Okay, it's biomass-based eco-friendly products. Something that is biodegradable, your plastic, your packaging that is your tapao plastics containers, your cutleries, all of those, the alternative of which the feedstocks are always biomass. So that is an advantage that we have. And now the question to us is whether we want to be a leader in this or whether we just want to be a follower. For 10, 20 years, Malaysians have been fed to a mindset that we just follow what other people do. Let me tell you this, that Malaysia is a country full of potential. We are not only rich in talents, in natural resources, in strategic location, we are also a people that is very positive. What we require is, again, a challenge, thought leaders, businessmen like Tan Sri, that will be able to chart a new future. Let us all become a leaders in the future. Don't just be a followers. Don't just be a followers and being contented that we are following these developed countries on this and this. Let's just start something for ourselves. And we can do that. And we can do that, and we will once again being labeled as the beacon for Southeast Asia, as a leader for economy in Southeast Asia. We must do it. And so with that, I have finished my 20 minutes of, I hope I did not, sorry, I did not time it. But I just wanted to share that there are many, many things that we can do as a nation, and that hopefully the course that come with it will help the country as well. I understand that Sunway Group also has a sustainable development manager, and we are seeing many, many corporates and companies are coming forward. I'm really looking forward for a good future for our country. I'm really looking forward that we become the leader in 5 and 10 years' time, and I hope that by then Prof. Jeffrey Sachs will be proud that he has made effort and come to Malaysia for so many years, and we just want to congratulate you, and we want to make you proud as well. With that, once again, congratulations and thank you.
Thank you, Minister Yeo, for your powerful call for bold, innovative thinking, and an equally powerful call for international justice. I would like to invite Tan Sri, Cheah, and Professor Sachs to come on stage to join the Minister in launching the new program. one by one. The left-hander will go first. Would the three of you please remain on stage? Okay. Oh, could the three of you please remain on stage? And I would like to request the senior management team of the Sunway Education Group join them for group photo. Elizabeth Lee, Lee Wing King, and Graham Wilkinson. Well, with that, it is my pleasure to announce the official launch of the Master in Sustainable Development Management at Sunway University.
Sustainable development. This is a crucial concept. I think it's crucial for the world. But what does it mean? I think our starting point has to be how crowded our world is today. We're 7.2 billion people. Billions more people are likely to be added to the world's population. This is making for a very complicated world. Sustainable development is really two ideas. One is a way to understand this complicated world. How do the economic, the social, the environmental, the political, the cultural factors. And the second aspect of sustainable development is the idea of sensible goals for this crowded, interconnected planet. How do we make the world both prosperous, fair, and also environmentally sustainable so that our numbers and our economy don't overrun the physical planet itself?
The Master in Sustainable Development Management program will train talented students in interdisciplinary analysis of economic, social, and environmental issues. This rigorous program is for people who desire to improve society and themselves. We are looking to enroll students from diverse backgrounds, from engineering and medicine, to social science and business, and to humanities and the arts. Graduates will have in-depth understanding of climate change, economic incentive and development, social inequality and mobility, protection of biodiversity, urban livability, and project design and management.
It's an unprecedented situation. It will be the challenge of your generation.
Now, we will come, Professor Jeffrey Sachs will deliver the lecture on how to achieve the SDGs. Jeff.
Very much. I think the answer to that question is very simple. I just come here every 6 months. The rate of progress is absolutely astounding, and we achieved the SDGs by 2022, about 8 years ahead of time. So this country is amazing. Tan Sri Jeffrey Cheah is amazing. You have created something that is so wonderful and so inspiring that you're really showing us how to achieve sustainable development, not in theory, not in words, not in textbooks, which is my field, but in reality. And I'm completely jealous of Malaysia having a minister like you. We don't have any ministers that could have 5 portfolios. We don't even have any ministers that can manage 1 portfolio right now. We have a minister of energy. Well, he does have a degree, we're told, but no evidence for it. And he clearly does not have a full portfolio. And the idea, by the way, of combining energy, science, technology, environment, and climate change is really a wonderful idea, because this is the holistic framework that is needed to be able to think big, think holistically, and achieve very big objectives. So I really congratulate you and pray for you. And, and we're going to be doing everything we can as fast as possible to train people for you so that what you put in place can be realized with the very skilled people. Sunway is making its mark in so many areas, and it's thrilling to be part of it. I was not resistant to using my name in any way, except that I thought it was unfair to the chancellor, whose name I thought it should be, but I'm so proud to be associated with Sunway University. And we see the innovation taking place, and I think that this is very remarkable, because this university will lead globally in many areas. It is doing that already. This new master's program will be extremely important, and it will be a beacon for universities around the world. We have made a global network, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, specifically so that a good idea can be transmitted worldwide. And we will use the learnings here to send that information worldwide. And what you do here, I'm committed to making sure that it is known around the world. I'll give another example. We had the session last year with planning ministry officials on how to plan for sustainable development goals. It was so successful and so inspiring that I mentioned it to our colleagues in China, and next week in Beijing, the National Development and Reform Commission, the NDRC, the planning ministry, will hold a workshop modeled on last year's workshop in Beijing for the planning functions in China and for other countries nearby. So you see how it scales, which is absolutely phenomenal. What we need to do to achieve sustainable development is to understand the challenges, take these good ideas and apply them rapidly in a pace that now our burgeoning technologies make possible. So we really are in an era where if we're clever and smart, we really can move very, very fast. Indeed, technological advance is taking place at a rate unimaginable in the past. We're now in the era of digital technologies, digitalization of virtually all parts of the economy. And we've never had a technological uptake as rapid as we have today. Mobile phones, the single most pertinent example perhaps, were a few thousand subscribers in 1980 and now 8 billion subscribers today. And no technology in human history has ever developed at anything close to this pace. We're entering the era of 5G. That will scale very quickly, and this will provide a platform for fundamental changes in how every sector of the economy functions and enable new kinds of processes and products, dematerialization of goods so that we can enjoy our lives and quality of life with much less impact on the planet. And this is what gives us hope that what seem like absolutely astounding goals could actually be achieved. Not all is good in this news, though, and I think that's really important to emphasize. Today, a new report was issued by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. It's not happy reading. I've only read, actually, just the headlines. It's just come out. But it was a long-awaited report on how the world should address the goals set in Paris in 2015 in the Paris Climate Agreement to keep global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius and to aim to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Just to explain what those words mean a little bit more precisely, everything about temperature is measured against the baseline of the so-called pre-industrial temperature of the planet, a temperature average around the year 1800. Of course, we don't have thermometer records for the world at that point, so we need proxy data for that baseline or that pre-industrial temperature. For a variety of reasons, my colleagues who are leaders in this, the Goddard Institute of Space Studies, which is a NASA unit, has said that the temperatures between 1880 and 1910 are a good proxy for that earlier period for a lot of technical reasons. Now, we've already had warming, according to that standard, of 1.1 degrees Celsius. The limit is to stay well below 2 degrees and to aim to stay below 1.5 degrees. We've had 1.1 degrees Celsius increase of temperature, and we've already had massive disruptions around the world of climate. So we're not even in a safe zone now, much less what can happen in the future. There's bad news on top of that, which is that the planet has not yet warmed fully to the levels of greenhouse gases already in the atmosphere. The warming takes place gradually after the rise of greenhouse gas concentrations, mainly because it takes a long time to warm the oceans. The land warms faster, but the oceans, of course, have great heat capacity. So we're still probably with another 0.4 degrees Celsius just already built in by momentum to the greenhouse gas concentrations already emitted. Taking that into account, the report today makes a quite stark point, which is we almost surely cannot achieve the 1.5 degrees C, except with some overshooting, that it goes above and comes back down, and that even that would take an absolutely dramatic global concerted action of a scale and an intensity that has never been undertaken. But there are reasons to do that. And that is, I guess, another point to stress. Why would we even contemplate such a dramatic action? And that is because we are confronted with a dramatic reality. That even 1.1 degrees Celsius warming that we've had today has a character that is stunning to contemplate. We are now warmer on the planet than we have been at any time during the entire period of human civilization. Human civilization dates back approximately 10,000 years, because that was the end of the previous glacial period, and that was the start of agriculture and settled life. Humans as a species date perhaps 200,000 years, but our civilization is 10,000 years old. We're now warmer than at any time during this period. We're already out of a climate zone that we have known that has been the basis of our civilization. And my colleagues have told me for years they've terrified the wits out of me, I have to tell you, so I'm going to try to terrify the wits out of you, because they've really scared me over the years. They've told me repeatedly that all of the evidence is that as we have left what's called the Holocene climate, the civilizational climate, two phenomena are real. One is we're approaching temperatures, or maybe already reaching them, at which dramatic changes to the Earth's physical processes can occur. For example, a rise by several meters of the sea level. The last time Earth was as warm as it is today, or maybe a tiny bit warmer, sea level was 8 meters higher than today. That, of course, would be a catastrophic rise of sea level for hundreds of millions of people. And that may already be cooked in the books, as it were. And the second reality is that our climate system is unstable. It has feedback mechanisms, so that we could easily reach levels that trigger a rapid runaway climate system that is outside of human control. As the ice melts in the permafrost, for example, it could release so much methane and carbon dioxide that it sets a pulse of much further increases of temperature, so that we don't stop at 2 degrees or 2.5 degrees, but reach 3 or 4 or 5 degrees, which would be utterly catastrophic for food supplies, for human health, for human safety, for economic productivity. So before the minister leaves, I wanted to make one point, Minister. One quick point. Sorry to hold you there. Very impolite of me, but it's for the world. Actually, the case is quite seriously that every country must decarbonize by mid-century. This is not a choice, this is a need. It's the carbon arithmetic. How one pays for that, how one allocates fairness is another matter. But the pace is not set by the fairness, the pace is set by the survival needs. The fairness determines who pays, who bears the burden. And I couldn't agree with you more that the rich countries, starting with my own, have a tremendous historical responsibility, no question. We're trying to tell our president that every day, but I fear we're going to need a new president to understand that. And I have to say, in a non-political way, I'm working towards that. But the fact of the matter is we must move fast everywhere. And every country with fossil fuels says, not us, please. We'll do our part, but we can't really stop. And that attitude of Canada, of the United States, of Russia, of the Gulf countries, of Australia and so forth, will get us all killed, I'm sorry to say, or will wreck our future. So we have to have responsibility. But then my feeling is basically that nobody has the right to emit carbon. It's a disaster. But in terms of the damages, let those who bear the historical responsibility pay for it, just as you said. We have a polluter pay principle. We have a way to allocate damages. When a country is hit by a typhoon more intense than would have ever occurred without the human-induced factor, let those historically responsible for this increased intensity share the bill. And that is what the rich countries need to do, and I pledge to you my voice to help you do that. Please get your, and I mean it, get your colleagues diplomatically, other countries in the region, others to say this, get the African countries, the countries here that are not the responsible parties of this historical phenomena. Get it said quickly. We will carry this news. We have some important meetings ahead, including a high-level summit on climate change a year from now at the UN. Let's define what climate justice means very clearly. And that is, in my view, every country decarbonizes. You can't get out of that. But who pays for the losses and damages are those that are historically responsible. Who pays for the incremental costs for resilience, who pays for the break walls and the flood and the higher walls to prevent massive flooding, or who pays for the droughts are those who are responsible. And I'll tell you a secret. My country, which is completely irresponsible politically, by the way, that's not a secret, everyone knows that. My country is so rich that we could pay for that and hardly notice it. Mr. Bezos of Amazon fame, today, this morning, is worth $165 billion. So he could pay a little bit. He didn't need the corporate tax cuts that we gave him last year. And that's true of the massive wealth and of a country that produces $20 trillion a year. But we have a president, unfortunately, who is completely irresponsible, lives in the 20th century, is trying to recreate the 19th century, and we're trying to go forward to the 21st century. So we need your leadership. Raise your voice, and I promise you we'll take this fight for justice to the world and actually win it. So we have a big homework assignment, and we're in a great university that can give homework assignments. The homework assignment is 17 goals by the year 2030. I will simplify the homework just a little bit because I think one can define achieving the 17 goals by the concept of 6 big transformations. And I just want to summarize what these are because it's becoming clear what is ultimately needed. The first is quality education. This is not only the goal of SDG 4, quality education for all, but is actually the underpinning of all the other goals. And it's, as Tan Sri Jeffrey Cheah put it when he said that he thought education would be the key for success, this is the key for sustainable development as well. We need understanding, we need technical knowledge, we need a scientific approach, we need a logical approach, we need a moral approach, and a quality of education will impart all of those. We also know scientifically that quality education has to begin even at birth, even in safe pregnancy for the moms, but it really begins with early childhood development and pre-K for all children, and it must continue not only for Malaysia, through universal completion of upper secondary school, but completion in some kind of tertiary or skill-based vocational education for every person in every child in the country. Second is universal health coverage. This is formally SDG 3. One can say that the goal is called Healthy Lives for All at all ages. We have a great expert in the life cycle of health with us, Dr. Papima, and
honorary professor of Sunway University, so that's absolutely wonderful. You will tell us how to do this. We need, obviously, not only the healthcare system itself, but we need healthful and healthy lifestyles, and we need that in a world where, unfortunately, there are a lot of pressures to be unhealthy, and where one of the main business models in the world is to get us addicted to bad things. So the advertising industry aims to get us addicted to things that are not good for us. And we need the mindfulness, awareness, and education to resist that. And we need the regulatory process to prevent it. In the United States, the food industry, for example, is killing Americans. That's really unpleasant for a food industry. It's supposed to feed Americans, but instead it has created 40% obesity in the adult population, 70% overweight, and this is the result of foods that are unsafe, prepared in an unsafe manner, filled with sugar additives and other unhealthy processes. And this is part of what it means to have universal health care and health coverage. It means the possibility of healthy lifestyles. Third is what I was speaking about just a moment ago. We need to reach zero carbon energy systems. This is a challenge for all countries, but it's especially a challenge for fossil fuel producers like Malaysia, where there's an active industry, where the energy sector overwhelmingly is based on fossil fuels, not surprisingly because of your own holdings, and where the country is a major exporter of fossil fuels as well. This has to be phased out quickly if we're going to even have something close to climate safety. Fortunately, we have a massive set of breakthroughs, integrated breakthroughs in zero carbon energy sources: wind, solar, hydro, smart grids, much more efficient appliances, electric vehicles, which will replace internal combustion engines, and other technologies that will allow us to move to zero. I recommend for every country a long-term plan. It's not even long-term anymore to mid-century. A 30-year plan to plan the infrastructure and the energy, primary energy sources, the transmission systems that can bring emissions down to zero. Everybody's going to have to do that. Nobody quite believes it. But as we go year to year with more hurricanes, with more disasters, with heat waves of unprecedented temperatures, setting records like in India of reaching 50 degrees C in many parts of the country, absolutely uninhabitable, we're going to make this political change. The farther down the road a country is investing in fossil fuels, the more it's going to have to strand its assets. And this is a reality that is not quite accepted yet, except for those really looking ahead. As I've mentioned repeatedly, my president is still promoting coal, oil, and gas. He thinks this is clever. It is a reflection of the extent of corruption of our political system. There's big money in those sectors. They pay the politicians. You've probably heard a thing or two about that kind of process. You may have heard something about it somewhere. And this absolutely has to stop. And we know it, but we haven't yet acted on it. But what I'm sure is, I had the joy to say to the CEO of ExxonMobil, you are going out of business by mid-century. And he didn't believe me. But then the Pope told him that the same thing the next day, and his eyes opened up a little bit wider than when Professor Sachs told him that. So this is reality. And we need plans for that. And one of the commitments of the Jeffrey Sachs Center is to help work on those plans in detail. There are many energy experts in the center. It's very exciting. And we're looking not only at implementing projects on the campus, for example, that illustrate, test, measure how to move to 100% renewables, but also scoping out what can be done at the national and the regional level. A fourth transformation that is fundamental, and I think of fundamental importance for this country, is sustainable land use. Malaysia does not have it yet. Sustainable land use does not mean that the whole country is planting palm oil. That's sustainable, that is palm oil production, but not sustainable land use. That would destroy the incredible biodiversity that remains in this country and that is under profound threat everywhere. And palm oil is very profitable. And we discussed today whether it's reaching limits of profitability. I fear that it could be profitable to chop down all the rest of the remaining first growth forest and plant palm oil and still be profitable. It's quite possible. It would be a disaster to do so. Because remember the main point of sustainable development. The market signals are not at all accurate signals of what's useful, what's valuable, even what's affordable, even what is survivable. The market is broken. That's why we need sustainable development goals. It's driving us right over the cliff globally. If we follow the market signals, we will destroy the physical basis of our own survival. That is not a great invisible hand. That is going to strangle us, that invisible hand. And so we need to understand, we need to stop, not just follow the prophets, but to say the prophets are sending the wrong message. The market signals are sending the wrong message. And this country, as steward of unique biodiversity, needs to set clear boundaries. We will not chop down more forest. We will not destroy biodiversity. We will not drive the orangutan to extinction in Malaysia, as it's also occurring right now in Indonesia, which would be a massive crime against the future and against biodiversity and against one of our closest biological cousins as well. And there are many, many more examples. We have seen through Tan Sri Jeffrey Cheah's achievements what it means to restore degraded land from a wasteland into highly productive assets. That is part of what sustainable land use is, and sustainable land use also means do not degrade what is not yet wrecked. This is a major call for this country. A fifth area of transformation is our cities becoming smart cities with new models of transport, energy, water, sanitation, smart systems, and smart systems that are now using new artificial intelligence and new digitalization technologies. And the models for this are developing extremely rapidly and give us ways to make our cities much greener and more habitable than was true even in the recent past. And that brings me to the last of these areas, and that is the digital technologies themselves as the fundamental platform for achieving the other 5 major transformations. These are our new tools. The new tools allow for the mobilization of information, the improvement of efficiency of resource use, the savings of energy, water, the management of our global supply chains in ways that were simply impossible without the new digital technologies. We now have the possibility to ensure that all global supply chains are sustainable, because now you can track each kilogram of copper from its source, or each bushel of coffee, or each kilogram of soybean or palm oil from where it originates to its final use, and thereby make our systems accountable, sustainable, monitorable, verifiable in ways that were simply unimaginable in the past. And this, I think, is our greatest hope. And it's also, from an economic point of view, I think the soundest strategy for any country. My country, as I said, is trying to eke out the last bits of profit of declining industries, the fossil fuel industries and other polluting industries. Just keep them going a little bit longer. President Trump is intent on deregulation, which means just a little bit more wreckage. And we have, they make a mockery of trying to protect ecosystems and to preserve species. It's unbelievably short-sighted. And you'd think my president is a young man compared to your prime minister. And you'd think that as a young man, he would have a longer time horizon than he does. But we need to help our governments have the long time horizon. The idea is not the last bit of irresponsible profit on a market system that gives the wrong signals. The idea is the long-term well-being of the nation and of the planet. And that requires the foresight and the understanding and the knowledge to make that work. Well, let me say that I have real confidence that Malaysia will get there. And not only get there ahead of most of the rest of the world and provide a model for most of the rest of the world. And with this great university leading the way, and with the energy that you have given us and the confidence that you've given in the institutions you're building, I'm sure that we're going to get there. Thank you very much.
Jack?
Yes.
They just announced the Nobel Prize winner, Nordhaus and Romer.
Nordhaus?
And Romer for their work on the interplay of climate and ecology.
Very good. Excellent. Okay. Paul Romer. No.
Paul Romer.
Paul Romer. Oh, very nice. Okay, that's great.
William Nordhaus and Paul Romer.
Excellent. Yeah, William Nordhaus made the first statistical model of understanding the long-term implications of climate change. And so this is a wonderful prize, and noting how important this subject is. And Paul Romer looked at the economics of innovation in a very important and creative way. So this is a great prize. That's wonderful news. Great.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Tan. I want to talk about energy efficiency. 20 to 25 years ago, I used to go to Department of Environment. And in fact, the Director General of the Department of Environment actually came out in the public, in the press, to say that a comfortable aircon room should be about 24 to 25 degrees. Anything below that is a waste of energy. And I used to go to the Department of Environment, and the staff there comes in the woolen clothes. I say that then you are not walking the talk. And I like to say this because you go to almost any office in Malaysia, even here, you go to a Sunway library, students are all in heavy clothing. It means they are uncomfortable in the normal clothing in our climate. Why are they so, number one is the area is obviously too cold for them. Means it's obviously below 24 degrees centigrade. And I'm not sure about the temperature of this room. And if you multiply the room in Sunway plus all the universities in Malaysia, plus all the offices, we can save a lot of carbon decarbonization. So perhaps, for example, in this room, we could have a clock at the back there, perhaps a little to say that the temperature at this room is at this temperature. And below that, the bell will ring and say it's too cold.
Oh, thank you very much.
Or something,
for your point.
practical, so we can walk the talk.
Thank you very much.
So because I come here to office,
Yes.
and I feel very cold. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think the idea of actually students monitoring energy use is a very good one. In New York, we do it even better. The rooms are cold and the windows are wide open in the summer, so we're also air conditioning the outside as well.
I'm Abdul Qadir. I'm from Somalia. I'm also a student in Malaysia studying Masters in Sustainable Development Practice at University of Science, Malaysia. So I want to ask you a question which says, as the world is experiencing more an increase of population, an increase of natural resource use, with increase of economic development, as future practitioners of sustainable development, how can we balance all these issues just to save our planet? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, when I watched that, the video, which was taped, part of it was taped several years ago, I said 7.2 billion people on the planet. Today, it's 7.7 billion people. So from the time of the taping until now, we've had almost, not quite, but almost 500 million people added. This obviously puts this challenge as much, much more difficult. The good news is that for most of the world, the fertility rates have now come down enough that populations are either stabilizing or will stabilize in the next generation. In Africa, the fertility rates remain so high, about 5 children per woman on average, that the population is still soaring. So today, Africa's population in the sub-Saharan region is 1 billion people, but it is projected on the current trends to reach 4 billion people by the end of this century. That would be, I think, such an increase that it would be essentially impossible for Africa to develop in a sustainable manner. The pressures on the land and on the water and on the ecosystems, especially in a warming climate, would probably be insurmountable. So this suggests that we need to encourage the population stabilization everywhere where it's not yet achieved through a reduction of the fertility rates. The main thing that is needed to bring high fertility down is to enable girls in particular to stay in school longer and not to be pushed out of school at an early age, as happens right now in sub-Saharan Africa. So this is one of the major themes that I'm trying to emphasize, that the world should help the low-income countries in Africa to achieve universal education of boys and girls, at least up through the upper secondary school level, and do that as quickly as possible, because that will not only educate the children, but also those educated children in school longer will marry later, have fewer children, and reduce the population pressures enormously. And the question is therefore an operational and a financial one, how to increase the school staying dramatically. But that is in line with your question. If the world population can be stabilized at around 9 billion, which is feasible, from today's 7.6 or 7.7 billion, then even though that's a very big population, by being stable, it will make it much easier to achieve sustainable development. But we'll still have to work on all of the other issues, transforming the energy system, much greater energy efficiency, much greater efficiency of water use, and so on. But it will be feasible, at least with a stable or even gently declining population, to achieve those goals.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Zara Pang, and I'm from WWF Malaysia. So earlier we heard YBO say that the government will not sacrifice economic development to save the planet. And Professor Sachs, you, in your earlier speech, said the market is broken, it is leading us over the cliff, and the invisible hand will strangle us. So how would you respond to YBO when she says that they will not sacrifice economic development to save the planet?
Prof, there's one thing I'm confident about sustainable development, and that is your brilliance in this field is definitely sustainable. You should have got the Nobel Prize. It'll come, we hope.
Tell them to Stockholm.
Yeah. But Prof, we talked about Donald Trump, we talked about leadership all around the world, not doing enough. I think there's something missing in our global strategy, which is how do we get them to act? It's only the people who can do it. Now, how do we do it? Through education, through the UN, through some punitive measures, to persuade the people of the world to rise and fight for a better world.
Great.
What would your proposal be? And incidentally, if you can comment on what you think Malaysia should do in terms of the oil palm industry, let us know.
In terms of?
The palm oil industry.
Yeah. Great. Thanks very much. Well, I think the starting point is to say that in a world of runaway climate change, there won't be economic development. So one can't see this in broad terms as contradictory, because if we don't get the global climate under control, then the whole idea of continuing economic improvement is going to be hopeless. But there is a kind of free rider problem, which is that every government says, yes, that's right, we need to get climate under control, just not my part. Or maybe the idea, let the rich countries do it, but not the rest. The problem is now arithmetic. The arithmetic of global warming is really, really bad, really dangerous, really imminent. We don't have the time to separate out, you do it, but we won't do it. Because numerically, it doesn't work anymore. The distance to these dangerous thresholds is so close that we need all the world pulling in the same direction right now. I think it's perfectly right, as I was emphasizing and as the minister was emphasizing, that the rich countries have responsibilities financially that are large and significant, and they're not meeting them. And I want the developing countries to raise their voice clearly, because that's very important for justice. But it's not justice to say we won't do X, we won't sacrifice economic development for climate. I'd put it another way, we won't have economic development unless we make the transformation to decarbonization. And everybody now has to do that. There's no basis for Malaysia to say, well, we're not going to do it, but the others do it. It won't add up. if those are the approaches. We need everybody to make these changes. How to get the politicians to act, we're still trying to figure that out. You know, the truth is, the warnings came already 30 years ago. In 1992, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed. So we're 26 years after the signing of the treaty, which says to all governments we must reduce greenhouse emissions in order to stabilize their concentration, in order to avoid dangerous anthropogenic interference in the climate system. It was already said 26 years ago, but for most of that time, governments did very little. The United States obnoxiously said, this US Senate said, we're not going to do this for a long time. There were a lot of politics about this. One argument was, why should the US do it if China's not doing it? And there was a good answer, which was that in 1992 it explicitly said the rich countries need to move first and the developing countries afterwards. But the Senate ratified the treaty and then rejected it at the same moment. Complete political irresponsibility. But there is a deeper reason than pointing to China or some other countries. Our system in the United States is corrupt because the oil industry pays the campaigns for the politicians. And this is absolutely unacceptable. And so we have till today this broken system. And now we have a situation that's even worse, a president who doesn't even give lip service to doing the right thing. He's a very destructive individual, not just a corrupted political system. So this is a serious matter. I don't believe that the world should be run at the whim of a few individuals. The world has to be managed for the 7.6 billion people and their descendants whose lives depend on this being done in a sane, scientifically based manner. I've also given up basically arguing with a kind of yapping, ignorant, small fringe in the United States which says the science isn't real, which is also either a measure of ignorance or corruption so severe that there's no time to face that as well. The truth is the following. In the United States, 70% of the public says, let's get on with it. So this isn't about public opinion. This is about a broken political system, not about public opinion per se. So what do we do about it? Partly it is public awareness and education. Partly it is making clear plans of the right things to do, because most of the politicians have no idea what to do. They're not energy specialists. You can tell them something's dangerous, but they don't have an alternative. So it requires experts to make alternatives. And politicians should accept expert advice. They do on certain things. Thank God they don't meddle too much in air traffic control, for example. This is one of the most amazing systems on the planet. Millions of flights safely done because the politicians don't say, I'm going to appoint my friend there, or let's do it with the local knowledge, or that's not scientific. They leave it because they fly on these airplanes, so they care. And I would remind them they live on this planet too, and their children live on this planet too, so they have to get out of this and listen to expert engineering about the ways to actually move forward. That's one part that I believe. Another thing that I'm interested in is suing the governments and the oil industry until they get this right. And there is an increasing number of such lawsuits around the world, and they're making a difference. And the energy industry, again, in my country, ExxonMobil and Chevron were completely irresponsible. And so a number of state attorneys general took them to court. And now at least their legal departments are telling the CEOs, you better be careful. Because if you pretend climate change isn't real, then that is actually tantamount to financial fraud because you're providing misinformation to investors. And so now they're saying, oh, it's very real, we need to do something about it. Not because they became so honest and caring, but because their lawyers told them you can't continue to fake it this way. And so that is a kind of advance as well. So this is a fight on many sides. We need expert ideas about what to do. We need the major companies improving the technologies. China will be producing a lot of the low-cost, highly efficient energy systems of the future. That makes me happy because China operates at such a big scale that it's driving down the costs of photovoltaics. It's driving down the costs of wind turbines. It's driving down the costs of smart grids so that we're going to be beneficiaries of those smarter systems very soon. China's already brought wind and solar down to basically grid parity with fossil fuels in favorable geographic locations. This is a huge advance. So we're making headway, but it's a real battle every day. There are very few heroic politicians. There are very few. Politicians in general are followers, they're not leaders. And so we need, as thought leaders, to lead, and we need the public to say that they care about the safety of their families. And just to conclude on this, we're seeing devastating storms now at an increasing frequency. We had major hurricanes in the last year, 3 huge hurricanes last year, $300 billion of losses in the United States. We had major typhoons in this region. We had now, they call it a Medicane, a Mediterranean hurricane, hit Greece last week, extremely rare, because the warmer temperatures on the water are providing energy for these incredibly intense storms. So it's getting more and more dangerous. We do have a problem. Last year's hurricane that hit Puerto Rico killed 3,000 to 5,000 people. And then this was carefully studied by 2 scientific teams. And then the President of the United States, Mr. Trump, just denied it. He never read a journal article in his life. I know it. He doesn't read. That's the trap we're in. So this is a very serious, very difficult matter. And we need to keep pushing all the time to get this right. But I think the main thing, and I've said it 3 times, I'm going to say it one more time, we need to help the politicians have the right kinds of plans. Because governments have a hard time making the plans without a lot of expert input. And that's something that the universities can play an important role doing, and that I think that the Jeffrey Sachs Center can play a very helpful role doing in scoping out how Malaysia, in a prosperous, growing economy, could move to a zero-carbon energy system. We should demonstrate the way to do that.
Thank you.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you. You are right indeed. Most politicians are followers. I am one of yours. The context is, in the last general election, the first ever change of federal power was brought upon by pretty much every single Malaysian feeling the pinch. Yeah. The pinch being an economic pinch. It's all about the economy, basically. And I still remember very clearly the last time we met was at the Progressive Alliance convention in Berlin. where I was fortunate enough to represent the organization I led then, the International Union of Socialist Youth, which by default made me the global focal point for SDG 8. And one of the key discussions that came about was that we can have every system in place, every single measure that puts us on the trajectory of achieving all 17 goals. But at the end of the day, and I want to highlight this with a story, in that discussion that we had in a breakout session after our discussion in Berlin, one of the activists who joined the discussion in her capacity as an activist said, I can't do this anymore because we've just found out that European funding for my organization has just been cut. I can no longer do this as a job. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason why I bring this to this is I think we need to make SDGs or the chart or charting the path towards achieving of the SDGs profitable and a path that would bring about jobs, decent work for decent pay, so that we can bring decent livelihoods through the SDGs for a majority of people. Otherwise, people will just say to you that, yeah, it's good, but it's not my business because it doesn't pay me, it doesn't give me a livelihood. Now, I'm asking here, as the ED of our state think tank, that yes, indeed, most politicians don't know what they're talking about. They don't want to know what other people think. I am now asking for Sunway University, for Jeffrey Cheah Foundation, and yourself, that we in Perak, the Perak state government, we are seeking your help. Because we don't have all the solutions. And we want the solutions that the globe has to offer in terms of bringing an economic narrative towards achieving all 17 goals. And this is, this is sincere, this is urgent, this is what we need. The Perak state government, at least, I can tell you that we need it. And just to put a note on it, this is the home state of Tan Sri Jeffy that I'm from. Thank you.
Bravo. Thank you, and we have heard you, and everyone has heard you, and we will respond and help. And I wanted to show actually one picture, if I can get back to my presentation. For me, I often compare this to this moment of American history. This is President Kennedy in May 1961 saying this to the Congress. This was the moment when he said, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish. I love this statement for many, many reasons. President Kennedy said, let's go to the moon, and do it before the end of the decade. So first, he gave a specific goal. He didn't say, I think we should have a space program, or someday we should go to the moon. He actually said, before this decade is out, land a man on the moon and return him safely to the Earth. Then he didn't say, as most politicians would, this is easy. We know how to do it, and it's cheap. He said, none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish. And when you read this wonderful speech, he goes on to say to Congress, you know, going halfway to the moon is not very good. So if you want to do this, you're going to have to do it the whole way. And I ask you to think long and hard before you commit. So he talks against his proposal by saying it's hard, it's difficult. But I think we should do it. And of course, you know the history. Congress stood up and cheered and said, we do it. And 8 years later, Neil Armstrong walked on the moon and returned safely to the Earth. And it is a marvelous story of achievement. First, of a government of a leader that set a broad bold goal. Then the US government created a mechanism to actually achieve the goal. And that was, it created an expanded NASA, a National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And it told them, hire the best engineers in this country. And 500,000 people got involved in this if you add up all of the contractors and the direct employees of NASA. And the politicians didn't interfere. NASA didn't actually know how to achieve this goal at the beginning. Of course not. In fact, they had put one man in a suborbital launch of 3 minutes when President Kennedy made this speech. Alan Shepard had gone up in a very short little flight, and next thing he's saying, we'll go to the moon before the end of the decade. It took them 18 months to make the basic Mercury, Gemini, Apollo staged process. And then it's a miracle to watch this. But they were inspired. They had a timeline. They had a mission. They had adequate funding. The best engineers in the country were involved. And something absolutely magnificent was achieved with fantastic spillovers, not only across space science and satellite communications and photovoltaics and semiconductors and computerization and countless other new industries created as part of the spin-offs to this mission. So politicians should stand up and say, we're going to decarbonize by 2050 and we're going to make this work. And this is going to be good for this country and it's good for the world, and we're going to get the best of our engineers involved, and we're going to be working with top engineers around the world. We're going to be cooperating with China and with others to actually make this happen. And one slide of this that I really like that is relevant for this, one idea that the China State Grid Company is proposing, and it's a very technologically sophisticated state grid. It's a massive, grid. China State Grid is proposing to connect the world in a renewable energy smart system through long-distance transmission lines and connecting all of the high-quality renewable energy. And you can see you're a node of this network. And so connecting this region with a broader grid is really a smart idea and would enable much more efficient use of renewable energy. The core idea is if it's windy someplace, or if it's not windy someplace, it's going to be sunny someplace else or windy someplace else. And if the grid is large enough, you're balancing the intermittency and the stochastic, the random elements of these energy sources to reduce essentially the coefficient of variation of the energy and make it far less costly in need of battery storage or other backups of storage to run a renewable grid. It's a very good, smart idea, and it should be pursued at a regional cooperation level. So another thing that President Kennedy said about this kind of goal setting is very, very smart. In a speech in June 1963, when he was talking about the goal of peace, he said the following. He said, "By defining our goal more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we help all people to see it, to draw hope from it, and to move irresistibly toward it." This is a really smart idea about leadership. Define your goal more clearly. Make it seem more manageable and less remote. And then people can understand it, they can take hope from it, and they can embrace it. If you say to the public, stop climate change, they don't even know what that means. If you say, let's convert to clean energy, they begin to understand it. If you say, let's go to wind, solar, and hydro, and here's the map of how this country could power itself without any emissions of CO2, they'd really get that. If you add in the jobs that would be created in going that way, they'd really get that. And so that is making the goal more manageable and less remote. And I think it is really a brilliant way of leadership. And that is how I would essentially come back to this question. Let's make these goals understandable, show that they're manageable, show that they're desirable, and then people will move towards them in a big way.
Well, we have come to the end of today's proceedings. Let us give a big hand to Jeffrey Sachs for his activity. And I thank you, the audience, for your support in coming to this event.